You're listening to Overwatch Contenders Daily, your path to daily news, scores, and insights into the Overwatch League stars of tomorrow. Here's your host, LemonKiwi.
Overwatch fans, hope you're having a wonderful Monday. I know Mondays suck, but I hope this video doesn't and makes your Monday just a little bit better. My name is LemonKiwi, and this is Overwatch Contenders Daily, where today I have a pretty smart guy coming on. His name is Daniel. He's known online as Seksi. Yes, that's his name. And he's the head coach of #1 Pacific Region team Esports, where we're going to be talking about their quarterfinal match, how they're feeling going into the semifinals against Hong Kong Attitude, and strategies that they like to run, including triple DPS Torborn. I'm excited to talk about it. But first, let's get into some news. So first off, Mastermind, so a top Australian team in Contenders, going into their semifinal match, have parted ways with their support player Dalsu, I believe it's pronounced, and their analyst named Convertibles. So surprised to see roster changes going on sort of in the middle of playoffs, but hope it's for the best and wish them all the success with it. And secondly, in the news, Overwatch League Daily host Kick Tripod has announced that there's going to be an unset schedule for the Overwatch League Daily show. As you guys might or might not know, is our partner show. It's our buddy pals. So if you would like to monetarily support the show to keep John being able to do this full time, I've dropped a Patreon link in the description below. And if you don't have the monies, well, we appreciate all the love, such as sharing videos, likes, subscriptions, and love on Twitter is all things we love. But that's just something we'd like to put forward. But now let's go into my interview with Daniel, aka Seksi. So I'm here with Daniel, aka Seksi. Yeah, I'm gonna have to call you Daniel, but he's known online as Seksi, and he's also known as the head coach of Esports from the Pacific region. So how are you doing, Daniel? And tell me about this Seksi name of yours.
Sure, of course. First, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. The name, yeah, so I was probably about 12 years old when I came up with that name. Which
Don't we all just come up with that super young?
Yep, that was about 18 years ago for me, and at the time I think I saw it online in some forum. Back then the internet was not what it was today. Saw somebody use Seksi in that way, spelled with that. Thought it was the coolest thing ever. And growing up, I just kind of never left the handle. I felt like I had to stay true to myself.
Right. Going into a coaching role as quote Seksi, I guess the players probably don't call you that, right?
They do actually.
Oh, they actually do.
Yes, they actually do. I tell them, oh, actually, yeah. So funny story about that. I would just typically tell them, oh, you can just call me Daniel, or coach or whatever. I don't really care. But we actually have 2 other Daniels in our organization. So our team manager is named Daniel, and Huwu, our diva player, is also named Daniel. So that didn't quite work out. It
would be like Daniel 1, Daniel 2, and Seksi.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But get into the actual serious part of the interview, for you guys that maybe don't watch the Pacific region or are not as close to it, Esports, I mean, gotta say that they're the #1 team right now, undefeated, going into the semifinals after a pretty convincing win against, was it pronounced Talon or Talon? I already butchered it.
I think it's just Talon. Yeah.
Talon. Okay. Talon Esports. And it was pretty crushing, but to go into maybe the history of the team. So how did this roster come together? And I see some of you guys have long time history, and CKM, Tung, and I think Kura, you said, are newer to the roster. So tell us maybe how this team got together.
Sure. So as far as my history, I was doing part-time work for Esports as an analyst before the season. And for this season, they brought me on full-time as head coach. So this is kind of like my first, full season with them. So coming into the season, we had Ayua, Trill, Huwu, and Hus. Those were, part of the previous roster. So, we brought them on again. And we had to look for new support players. We parted ways with our support players. One of them, as you know, is Gumba, or as your viewers may or may not know, is Gumba.
Right.
He is the analyst for LA Valiant. So we had to find some new talent. And we found Tung and Kura from the Australian region, and we picked up CKM as like a projectile specialist to play things like Pharah and Genji. And yeah, we were just looking to, get as much talent as we can. We wanted to stay true to, Australia and get as much Australian talent as possible, which I think we did a good job of doing that. Yeah.
For sure. And I think some people missed CKM in that last match. I had a couple of people like, where did he go? And I guess he said he wasn't feeling well, but I Eat You Up really made up for the role. And he's quite an outstanding player. It was my first time watching the Pacific region. And I was like, holy crap. But as the coach for the team, we see on the outside the pretty picture of Blank Esports is undefeated. They're one of the best teams. But what are some, I wouldn't say weaknesses, but what are some things that you guys are working on or improving on internally?
Yeah. Oh man, there's lots of things, right? With any team, you could be the best team in the world and you'll always have things to improve upon. So for us, just with painting with broad strokes, I would say that's communication with like most teams. We're trying to add some more versatility to our strategies on lots of different maps. Our Sombra dive has a long way to go. To be fair, we've improved a lot over the season. I think as you probably saw in the last match, we did a lot of Sombra dive. Still needs work though. And then there's actually a lot of certain parts of certain maps where we actually do struggle a lot, and we focus on those parts heavily. So yeah, there's still so much we have to work on.
And speaking of interesting or maybe different strategies that you brought out, on Numbani and Lunar Colony defense, we saw, I guess, a pocket strat, the casters call it. Sometimes I see it as a meme, but it actually has some value, to be honest. And it's not something I've seen in NA at all, at least from what my memory serves. But triple DPS, Torborn, Widow, Junkrat with an Orisa, Solo Heal, Mercy. And for newer Overwatch fans out there, could you explain how this is set up and why this strat could be successful on a defense on those maps?
Yeah. So I guess there's a couple things there. The first thing is it's kind of a snowball defense, because if you play it correctly, after that first fight, you can, start to build armor. You get close to Riptire, you get close to walls, you get close to Molten Core. And those abilities can be extremely oppressive. So it's one of those kinds of defenses where if you feel like your opponents aren't, really crisp at running dive, or maybe they don't know how to react in that situation, they won't swap to the appropriate counters, there's a good chance you can actually just full hold. And it was unfortunate on both those maps, Horizon and Numbani, that we actually didn't full hold, because we were actually just a few tweaks, a couple things, if they go differently, I think we could have full held them on those point A points. Yeah.
So it's a snowball kind of, you need to work on your ult economy between the Molten Core and the other ultimates that you might get, let's say the Riptire. And do you think that, I guess I've been told this strategy is actually quite common in the Pacific region. Has it changed, or how does that strategy adapt now that Sombra is really in the meta right now?
Actually, and that's kind of one of the scary things into that composition is Sombra. But one thing you have to remember is on those maps, on Numbani and Horizon, there's kind of like those catwalks that kind of surround the point. Mm-hmm. And even with Sombra, again, if you feel like your team doesn't have the most crisp dives, you can take advantage of that and just start to snowball. And it becomes really hard to kind of get up there and do something about that. But as you pointed out, with Sombra, it actually becomes a lot trickier. Because if your opponents get up there with a big fatty EMP and you're kind of clumped up, your team has to do a good job of kind of spacing out. And there actually are different versions of that defense, because on the fly, you either want to kind of be a little bit more clumped up, or you actually want to be more spaced out. So that's kind of one of the key elements in going into the EMP, is to just make sure your team is spread out a bit.
Yeah, I've seen sort of some versions of that where there's going to be a Orisa set up on one part of the point and maybe the rest of the team on the other part. And it's interesting to see how people are positioned differently when there's a Sombra on the other team. But to get into now, map 3 ended up in a draw on Lunar Colony, where both you and the other team failed to get any percentage time on point B in the second rotation. So it seemed like such an easy breeze going through this match, and then this one ended in a draw. So why was this map so different?
Yeah, it was just a couple of key moments, and we just played the match last night, so I have yet to go over all the footage.
Okay.
But from memory, but from what my memory serves, I believe we made a couple of critical errors with our ultimate economy. If I'm not mistaken, on point A defense, the first round, we used walls and tire at the same time, which was a pretty big blunder. We could have used either, because I believe we were trying to get back into position after the previous fight. We kind of had a stalemate, which for the defense is typically a win. But people were coming back from spawn. We used walls and tire at the same time. And if I recall, their Genji killed our tire. And then from there, we lost that ultimate advantage that we had, and it just kind of snowballed. So along with some other, small but critical errors, I think we could have just full held there and just won that map. But, with the second round, I believe we had just like a minute or two, which, isn't really enough time to kind of pull out a really good offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it came down to the wire, and I mean, you guys were able to hold that point B defense to make it a draw. So it was still a really good match to watch. And, it still ended in a 3-0, but I guess you technically went to 4 maps. So we got some more action there. But what I found that was interesting about the Pacific region that I learned recently is you guys get to play on LAN through I believe the regular season and the playoffs, which is a lot of the regions have to play this online, except, the LAN for Poland, for NA and EU. And a lot of regions suffer from ping issues and disconnects and, those disadvantages. But does playing in a LAN setting sort of maybe add some mental stress of being onto a big stage and in comparison to maybe playing at home where you're comfortable? Or how does your team feel being on the main stage?
Yeah, so there's a couple things there. The first is obviously it's a better environment for, coaching and working as a team. There's so much more you can do as a coach, as an analyst, when you just have face-to-face time with your players. So I can't, understate that enough, that it's so critical that I can, be with my players. And there's so much that body language does and facial expressions and being able
to hug them and,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, and it's just nice to be able to point at a screen and say, oh, look at this and blah, blah, blah. Whereas when you're online, you have to use these tools, which take so much time to put together. I've done that before. I've done, remote analyst work for this team specifically and for other teams. And it takes so much time and effort to make a really well-made, a graphic or video to express a thought, which could be expressed in 30 seconds if you were just next to the person. You just say, oh, this, and you pull up a VOD, you say this, and you're done. So that's obviously great. To your point about, the mental stress, yeah, definitely. I think playing on LAN, and just having like the cameras on you and things like that, I believe for the players, it's obviously a bit more stressful, definitely.
Well, that's hype too, and you have a crowd cheering for you, and I'm sure it kind of stimulates some energy than being at home. But I know I would be stressed, but obviously I'm not a pro player. But
and everyone handles it differently, right? Like some players enjoy it, some players, not so much. Some players would like to just be at home and chill, but at the same time, like you said, maybe that doesn't hype them up, and maybe they perhaps don't perform better. But everyone's different.
Yeah, I know some people definitely prefer the main stage, and then some people don't like the crowd watching and all this, all this intense energy around you. But for the final question, there's not much to ask about the quarterfinal match. It seemed like a pretty good breeze, and you guys have a pretty solid roster. But now the semifinal match will be against Hong Kong Attitude, so they're the second seed in Group A with a 4-1 record. What kind of preparations are your team going to be making to face those particular players, and are you confident going into that semifinal match?
Yeah. So again, the matches were just last night, and their match actually was last night as well. So I have yet to fully review the footage, but I kind of skimmed through it to look at what comps they were running, and it's actually really interesting because they're running a lot of Lucio Moira Sombra dive, which is something that we did a lot last night. So it'll be really interesting to see how we clash in terms of like our styles about how we run that comp, because mirror comps sometimes, from a viewer's perspective, at least for me, I find it very boring. But, being inside and strategizing around it can be pretty interesting. So we'll definitely have to make sure that we either, tweak our comp a bit to counter that, or just keep the comp that we run and, make sure we outsmart them, so to speak.
So being prepared for their Sombra dive and what kind of supports they're running. But have you guys scrimmed against them or had any experience maybe outside of Contenders? Like, do you know more about this team, or are you kind of going in fresh from VOD review kind of thing?
So we haven't scrimmed them at all this season. In terms of before I was a part of Blank, I don't know if they scrimmed them in the past, but this season we have not. So yeah, in terms
surprise.
Yeah, so in terms of preparation, we just need to really look at their VODs, especially last night's VODs, because it's playoffs and, every team is, playing to win as fast, as quickly as possible. Whereas like in, the end of the regular season, if you kind of know what your seed is going to be, you might take some maps easy and, just kind of cool off to make sure you don't show anything. So, my job definitely for the next 24 hours is to look at what they did and, strategize around that.
So a bit of a surprise, a little bit of studying to do. So how confident is your team to take the semifinals? Or are you just going to hope for the best?
No, I think we're very confident. Last night went pretty well. There was definitely some things we pointed at to make sure, okay, let's make sure we don't do this. We don't do this. You know, the obvious stuff. We still have to go over the finer details. But no, I think we're feeling good. And I was really happy with like kind of the mental fortitude of my players, because they drew, which for them stung a little bit. They were expecting just, I don't want to say we were expecting a 3-0, but we definitely had the ability to do that, which technically we did. We 3-0-1, I guess. But, I was really happy that they bounced back from that draw, because a lot of teams can, fall apart after a situation like that.
Yeah, and you got an even tougher opponent. You got the 4 seed, and then now you're going against, I think, the 2nd seed, and I'm excited to see. And now it's actually even more interesting that you haven't really scrimmed against them or don't know much about them except what you can VOD review. And a lot of teams have at least scrimmed the teams in their region, and they kind of know what they run. So you never know what kind of pocket strat might come out in a semifinal match. And I think it'll be a pretty close one between you two, but we're unbiasedly cheering for you. And
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Wish you guys the best. And that will be it for this interview. Thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So that'll be today's episode. Make sure you check out Seksi, or Daniel, and the team from Blank Esports when they face off against Hong Kong Attitude in the semifinals. And we will see you guys on Wednesday.